Hello. My name is Maribel Kane, and 3 days ago, my own mother texted me not to come home for Thanksgiving because, in her words, my presence ruins the celebration atmosphere. I'm not making that up. She didn't call. She didn't ask if I was okay. She sent a message like I was RSVPing to a funeral. My own. And now I'm on a plane headed straight into the storm. I didn't see the message until almost midnight. The glow from my laptop flickered against the black mug of chamomile tea I hadn't touched. My email sat open. The flight confirmation to Boston for Thanksgiving, still blinking in its tab like it was mocking me. Everything was booked. Non-refundable. I'd even paid extra to land early, to help set the table, to fold the napkins the way Mom liked. I was ready to go home, or whatever was left of that word. Then my phone buzzed. One short vibration. The sound barely registered at first, swallowed by the low hum of my apartment's heater and the melting Oslo snow tapping gently on the window. I reached for the phone without much thought. The message preview was just one line. From Mom. No emojis. No pleasantries. No warning. Your presence ruins the celebration atmosphere. That was it. No hi honey. No how's the weather? Not even a fake attempt at concern. Just that one clinical sentence, short and surgical. A message stripped bare of pretense. And maybe that's what made it worse. It didn't try to pretend. There was no sugar this time. Just poison straight to the vein. I froze. Not because I didn't expect it, but because I had. And that's what cracked me open. The silence in the room deepened. My apartment felt colder, despite the heater working overtime. I sat there, my spine stiff, my hands still hovering over the keyboard, like a statue caught mid-thought. She'd said worse before, usually hidden inside sarcastic jokes at dinner, or slipped between compliments aimed solely at a Lowen. My sister. Their pride. Their air. But this wasn't masked. This wasn't a quiet dig at my expense. This was rejection, naked and unapologetic. A message that wasn't a message. A sentence that felt like a sentence. A verdict. I stared at the screen, trying to absorb the full shape of her words. My chest didn't rise. My jaw didn't clench. The shock didn't make me cry or scream or throw the phone. I simply stilled. Not numb. Not yet. Just fading. Dimming. I could feel myself receding from the moment, like a tide pulling away from shore, leaving nothing but wet, cold sand behind. My fingers curled around the edge of the table. Not in anger, just to ground myself, to remember I was real, that I was still here. The scent of reheated soup lingered in the air. Faint printer toner. My eyes burned, not from tears, but from staring too long at things I couldn't change. I picked up the phone again. My thumb hovered above the keyboard. The old version of me stirred. The one who still wanted to be loved, to make things okay. She wanted to say something calm, reasonable, something that would invite peace. If that's how you feel. Delete. No problem, I understand. Delete again. The cursor blinked back at me, waiting. I typed. Fine. Just that. No punctuation. No room for misinterpretation. I paused. Then pressed send. The word sent glowed in pale blue on the screen, as if it had solved something. It hadn't. Nothing loosened in my chest. No tears came. Just the familiar, choking silence. The echo of always being too much for people who expected me to give everything. My existence had never fit into their script, and now, finally, they were erasing my lines altogether. I clicked back to my email. The flight was still confirmed. I could cancel. Eat the cost. Stay here in my quiet Oslo apartment and pretend Thanksgiving didn't exist. Bake cookies. Stream some show I wouldn't remember by morning. But then something shifted inside me. Not a scream, not a spark. Just a decision. I wasn't going home because I was invited. I was going because they didn't get to tell me I didn't belong. Not anymore. I stood up. My legs ached slightly from sitting too long, but I moved with a strange calm, a kind of resolve I hadn't felt in years. I crossed to the closet and pulled out my suitcase from beneath the coats I hadn't touched since last February. The zipper rasped as I opened it. The sound, too loud in the stillness. I packed without thinking. My favorite sweaters, a pair of jeans that still made me feel like myself, comfortable boots, a scarf Alohan once called too bold, which made me pack it first. I walked to the bookshelf and let my fingers run across the spines. One book, about grief and forgiveness, had been meant for Mom. I'd picked it out 6 months ago, back when I thought maybe we could heal or at least talk. I paused, then placed it back. This year I wouldn't bring gifts. I wouldn't bring stories. I wouldn't bring apologies or expectations. This year I wouldn't offer olive branches. Let them burn. I zipped the suitcase shut and placed it by the door. Then I sat on the edge of the bed, hands on my knees, breathing slowly. My phone's screen had gone dark again, but that message it pulsed in my mind. Your presence ruins the celebration atmosphere. Not we miss you. Not come home. Just a command, disguised as a dismissal. But here's the truth I finally stopped running from. They didn't forget me. They chose not to remember. That hurt more than any absence. And yet, something inside me refused to shrink. My hand found my passport. The weight of my name on the page felt heavier than ever before. But it also felt solid, real, unshakable. I whispered, not to the walls, not to the wind outside, but to the version of me they tried to erase. I'm coming anyway. Not because they want me there, but because I'm done letting them decide when I'm allowed to exist. The seatbelt light had just blinked off when I powered my phone back on. I didn't expect a welcome text. No apologies. But I also didn't expect this. The screen lit up. Then again. And again. Each buzz stacking against the silence of the flight, like an unpaid debt. Missed call. Missed call. Missed call. 81 of them. I froze in my seat. Not because I was afraid, but because part of me understood something no one had said yet. This wasn't panic for me. This was panic about me. One voicemail stood out. A number I didn't recognize. Area code from home. I tapped it, held the phone to my ear, and let it play. Ms. Kane, this is Charles Jennings with First Haven Bank. We have a few questions about the 2017 refinance package listed under your name. Please return this call at your earliest convenience. I blinked slowly. The plane hadn't even fully taxied to the gate. I hadn't even seen the rain yet, but the flood had already begun. I gripped my bag tighter, feeling the rough leather dig into my palm. My breath wasn't shallow. It was absent, as if my body knew before my brain caught up. This isn't about love. It's about exposure. They weren't calling because they missed me. They were calling because I was finally close enough to see what they'd built behind my back. The rain on the airport windows blurred everything outside. Travelers rushed around me, dragging kids and carry-ons, speaking into phones, waving at arriving relatives. I stood still, in a city I once called home, in a family that no longer could. I walked toward baggage claim. My feet fell heavier with every step, as if each tile knew a secret I didn't want to remember. I opened the family group chat to distract myself. The one with the pumpkin emoji Mom had added last year. Gone. Not archived. Not silent. Deleted. I tried refreshing. Nothing. I checked again. Gone. Not even a breadcrumb of belonging left behind. My heart didn't race. It shrank. I opened Instagram. I don't know why. Maybe to find a crack in the narrative. Something to say they'd made a mistake. That I still mattered. A photo from my cousin popped up. Candlelit table. Handwritten place cards. Pies lined in perfect symmetry. Caption: Thanksgiving planning, baby. The screen showed their group chat. Everyone tagged. Everyone but me. They hadn't forgotten to include me. They designed the entire celebration around my absence. I closed the app, but the ache stayed. Not sharp, not sudden, just dull and familiar, like being left out of a conversation you never asked to join, but still hope someone would whisper your name. The bank voicemail replayed in my head. Refinance package. 2017, my name. I tried to recall where I was that year. I wasn't even in the country. I had no idea what they signed, or what they didn't. They made room at the table by deleting my name, and I still bought the damn ticket. I sat on a bench near baggage claim, suitcase beside me. My phone buzzed again. A text from a cousin I hadn't heard from in 2 years. You okay? Mom's freaking out. Said something about your number on the house paperwork. Drama. No punctuation. No warmth. Just information. Like I was a glitch they were trying to debug. I didn't respond. I stared at the screen until it faded. Until I saw my reflection. Tired eyes. Jaw clenched. Not weak. Not angry. Just tired of being surprised by how low they could go. I checked my inbox. There it was again. Confirmation of my booking. Motel room 3 exits from town. Cheap, old, safe. Just like I remembered. I didn't go straight there. Instead, I drove by the house. Their house. Lights on. Windows warm with flickers of candles. A wreath on the door. 3 cars in the driveway. Mine used to be the 4th. No one looked out the window. No one saw me parked across the street. They probably didn't think I'd come. Maybe they hoped I wouldn't. I watched for a few minutes. Not stalking. Not longing. Just verifying. Verifying that everything they'd built had required my disappearance. I wasn't missed. I was tracked. I didn't fall through the cracks. I was deliberately erased. The irony? Their panic didn't come from me showing up. It came from me not answering. The phone buzzed again. Another call. Blocked number. I silenced it. They could scream into the void. I wasn't available anymore. I drove to the motel, rain streaking sideways across the windshield, the night swallowing the edges of the road. The room was small, damp, the kind of place with scratchy towels and wallpaper that peeled behind the sink. But it had a door that locked, and that was enough for now. I collapsed onto the bed, shoes still on, phone in hand. The voicemail was still saved, the group chat still gone. I thought of the Thanksgiving pies, the place cards, the seat that used to be mine, and I let the ringing in my head echo, not from the phone, but from the space they cleared to pretend I never existed. The motel room reeked of bleach and something older, like old rain stuck in the carpet. The hum of the air unit was the only noise, its filter rattling every few seconds like a reminder that I wasn't home. But then again, where was home? Certainly not the last place I'd slept, and definitely not the house where they filmed the video. I hadn't slept. Not even close. Just laid there on the stiff mattress, the scratchy sheets twisted around my legs like restraints, my body still but my mind racing. My eyes were dry. The kind of burn that comes from blinking too little and thinking too much. The only light came from my phone's screen, the faint glow coloring the room in a sterile shade of blue. It felt like holding a ghost in my hand. I opened Instagram, not out of curiosity, but out of compulsion, like picking at a scab you swore you'd let heal. I didn't expect much. Maybe a vague family shot, maybe a pumpkin pie post, or an over-filtered selfie from Vera. But there it was, a video post from her account. The thumbnail showed a low and mid laugh, holding a perfectly brown pie with fake holly around the edges. Her teeth practically glowed, that glossy, overexposed kind of perfection that only exists in curated feeds and family performances. I tapped play. No sound at first, just slow-motion clips. A table set too perfectly, matching napkin rings, candles flickering like a scene from a holiday ad. Then came the music, soft, synthetic violins layered with piano chords so insipid they almost made my skin crawl. The caption read, "This year we're grateful for family that always shows up." I watched in silence. Cousins I barely recognized giggled in the kitchen while tossing flour at each other like they were auditioning for a baking show. Eloan appeared again, cradling a baby I didn't know. She bounced it gently like it was her own, smiling with practiced warmth. Dad, in his favorite flannel, carved the turkey while everyone clapped like he'd done more than show up with a beer in hand. Then they each turned to the camera, one by one, offering rehearsed gratitude. "I'm thankful for a sister who always answers my calls." Eloan beamed. "I'm thankful for my daughter who never forgets to check in," Vera added, her hand lovingly placed on Eloan's shoulder. Each word felt like a deliberate chisel, carving me further out of the family frame. Not forgotten, omitted, strategically. My name was never mentioned. Not a single glance at a shared memory. No passing comment. Not even an awkward edit to imply I existed. It wasn't an oversight. It was a message. They didn't miss me. They erased me. And they did it in high definition. I didn't cry. I didn't blink. I just let the video loop again, watching it the way someone might observe their own memorial montage, playing on a screen they weren't invited to see. It felt posthumous. Then came the next blow. A story post. Eloan again. This time seated at the dinner table in the very blouse I had left behind years ago, thinking it was lost or donated. My blue blouse. One of the few things I had cherished. I had worn it on the day I graduated. And there she was, wearing it like a costume. The caption, written in elegant white cursive across the screen, read, "Family isn't who shows up. It's who knows their place." I sat up, phone still in hand. That was no coincidence. She knew I'd see it. She wanted me to see it. My fingers trembled, not with sadness, but with the muscle memory of being replaced, of being the afterthought, the space filler, the one whose name got written in pencil while hers was etched in stone. I put the phone down, not to destroy it. I didn't want revenge. I wanted understanding. I needed to know how many stories had been told in my name without my voice. How many lines they wrote for me in this script I never auditioned for. I had always been the backdrop to their spotlight, the prop, the cautionary tale. She's always been the audience, and I've always been the seat they needed emptied. Outside, the first light of morning filtered through the plastic blinds, dull and gray. The rain had stopped hours ago, but the pavement outside still shimmered, heavy and dark like it had soaked up everyone's secrets. At 6:03 a.m., my phone buzzed again. This time, an email notification. Subject, outstanding balance, $4,716.32. Final notice. The sender. Coastal Recovery Billing, Oregon. I sat upright, dread crawling slowly up my spine. I opened the message. A formal note from a hospital billing agency. Attached, a PDF. Patient name, Vera Mathers. Guarantor, Maribel Kane. My name. As the responsible party, I reread the form again and again, trying to find an error. A typo. Anything. But it was real. They'd used my name. They'd signed it. Like I was some emergency fund they didn't even need to ask. Date of service. 18 months ago. I was in Oslo then. I hadn't been in the States in nearly 2 years. They did this behind my back. Used my name like a key to unlock a door they had no right to enter. As if I owed them. As if my silence was consent. They didn't ask because they didn't think they needed to. Because in their minds this was family. Not chosen. Obligated. I printed the bill. No shaking. No pacing. No storm. I walked over to the desk shoved into the corner of the room. Dusty. Worn. It looked like it had survived more confessions than sermons. I opened my laptop and created a folder. Debt disguised as devotion. I dropped the PDF in. Then I pulled out another file. One I had started years ago, but never dared open again. Bank statements. Wire transfers. Old receipts. I had kept every one. Out of habit. Out of hope. Mortgage payments. Gas bills. Even the down payment on a Lowen's car. They kept calling it love. Kept calling it family. But I have documents that say otherwise. They told me I didn't belong. But they sure knew how to cash in on my presence. Now I would begin collecting the truth. One unpaid bill at a time. The folder set open like a wound. Each file inside a fresh paper cut. Receipts from years past. Emails never answered. Names scribbled on forms I never saw. I stared at it not with disbelief, but with quiet recognition. Like staring at your own reflection after years of being told the mirror was broken. My phone buzzed, cutting through the stillness. The screen lit up with a name I hadn't seen in over a decade. Silas. It took me a full minute before I opened the message. If you're in town and need a real seat at a real table, mine is open. I read it twice. 3 times. I didn't know what stunned me more, being invited, or believing for 1 second I might be welcome. My thumbs hovered over the screen. I typed, deleted, then finally responded. What time? His reply came back almost instantly. 2 o'clock. Bring an appetite. Bring nothing else. The next few hours moved in slow motion. I dressed without thinking, just something clean, something soft. I tucked my hair behind my ears, though no one would care if it was brushed. I didn't pack a gift. I didn't bring flowers. I didn't know penance. I drove in silence. No music. No podcast. Just the rhythm of tires against wet pavement and my heart beating in a tempo that didn't feel entirely mine. Silas's house sat the edge of a road that didn't lead anywhere important. His mailbox leaned slightly forward, the paint chipped. I pulled in slowly. The porch light was already on, though it wasn't dark yet. He opened the door before I knocked. Still always early, he said, smiling like the years between us hadn't been soaked in silence. Inside smelled like cinnamon and wood smoke, the kind of warmth you don't get from central heating. 2 plates waited on the table. No candles. No folded napkins. Just real food. Real intention. We didn't talk much during the meal. We didn't need to. The silence between us wasn't awkward. It was breathable. Like we both understood the luxury of not having to fill every inch of air with words. When we finished, he stood and disappeared into the back room. I stayed seated, tracing my finger along the edge of the plate. When he returned, he was holding an envelope, yellowed, slightly worn, my name written on it in a hand I hadn't seen in years. Grandma's. He placed it in front of me, without a word, just a nod. I stared at it, my fingers trembling slightly as I broke the seal. The paper inside was thin, folded twice, ink fading. Maribel. If you're reading this, it means you came home, even if just for a moment. I've watched the way they treat you. I've heard the way they speak about you when you're not in the room. You are not cold. You are just unprotected. And that scares them, because they can't shape what they can't break. If no one else ever tells you, let me. I saw you. I always saw you. I didn't cry. Not immediately. I folded the letter slowly, deliberately, like folding a flag after a battle. Someone had seen me, even if she wasn't here anymore to say it aloud. Silas cleared his throat. She left that with me years ago. Said I'd know when it was time. It's time, I whispered. We sat in silence a little longer. Not the cold kind. The kind you wrap around your shoulders and let settle. Later, back at the motel, I showered. Let the steam rise until my reflection disappeared from the mirror. I dried off without looking. My phone rang again. This time a different name. Zadie. My youngest cousin. Barely 20. Still stuck in the part of life where you believe everything your parents tell you. I answered on the third ring. Maribel? She asked, voice unsure. Yes. They said you stole money, that you ran off, that you didn't even call when Nana was in hospice. Silence. They said you didn't care, she added, softer. I closed my eyes, leaned back into the creaking motel headboard. But then I saw your name on the utility bills. I saw it listed on the house paperwork. Why would your name be there if you weren't around? My voice didn't shake. It didn't rise. It just came out. Sometimes they use your silence as proof of guilt. I kept quiet too long. More silence. But this time it felt like she was still there, on the other end of the line, thinking. I think I believe you, Zadie whispered. I didn't cry. I just exhaled, slowly, like a woman finally seen. Zadie's words stayed with me long after the call ended. I think I believe you. 6 words that shouldn't have meant so much. But they did. I couldn't sleep again. The motel ceiling creaked with every shift in the wind, and I lay awake thinking about what belief costs when it comes from someone who grew up on the other side of the story. The next afternoon, I drove back to Silas's cottage. The air outside was crisp, and the road was wet from a morning drizzle. He greeted me with the same calm nod, motioning me toward the kitchen table. On it was a stack of papers, bound together by a rubber band. These came in after you left, he said. I thought you should see them. The light filtering through the curtains turned everything gold. I sat down, slid the stack toward me, and peeled the band off. At first, the words blurred. Then one line came into focus, my name. Co-signer, Maribel Kane. The document was dated 6 years ago. The signature at the bottom, a near-perfect match to mine. Except it wasn't mine. My hands went cold. Where did you get this? An old banker I used to know. He handled the refinancing for your parents. He said there were inconsistencies. Inconsistencies. The word sounded too polite for what this was. This wasn't an error. This was theft wearing a smile. I stared at the page. My signature flowed in smooth loops, confident and practiced. I was never asked. I was never even told. My name was just placed there, like a patch holding up their collapsing lives. They trusted I wouldn't question it. I dropped the paper onto the table. My pulse was steady, but my breathing wasn't. They signed for me. Silas didn't argue. He just looked at me, the corners of his mouth set with quiet fury. They used you, he said. I know. The golden light from the window suddenly felt sharp. I pushed the paper aside and let the silence stretch until it hurt. They called me difficult. They called me distant. They called me ungrateful. And all along, I'd been their collateral. The realization hit like a brick wall. I wasn't just an accessory to their narrative. I was the foundation they'd built their lies on. Later that evening, I sat at the same table, staring at a smaller folder Silas had found tucked in the bottom of a box. It wasn't labeled, just sealed with tape yellowed from age. Inside were receipts, hundreds of them, mostly handwritten. My name popped up again and again. I recognized the logo of a bakery from town, one that used to sit across from the courthouse. It had closed years ago, or so I thought. The receipts told another story. Flour orders, equipment rentals, property taxes, all under a business license with my name listed as co-owner. My blood ran cold. They hadn't just borrowed my name. They'd built entire ventures on it. The dates were recent, just a few months ago, and the amounts were enormous. I hadn't signed anything, hadn't agreed to a single cent, yet somehow I was tied to every failed idea, every bill they hadn't paid. For years, they'd used my distance as proof of my selfishness, but the truth was simpler. I'd been the silent investor in a life I was never allowed to live. I whispered to no one. I was always the perfect pawn. Not because I wanted to be, because I made it easy. I closed the folder slowly, feeling my heartbeat in my fingertips. My hands didn't shake. My face didn't twist in rage. I just sat there, quietly stunned by how much faith I'd given to people who'd only seen me as a signature. This wasn't a mistake. This was strategy. I placed the folder back on the table and locked it inside Silas's old filing cabinet. My reflection in the glass pane looked foreign, like I'd aged a decade in a day. This was no accident. I drove past my parents' house that night. The lights were on, laughter spilling out through the half-drawn curtains. Through the window, I saw Aloan move between guests, her hand brushing Mom's shoulder. The perfect daughter in the perfect home. Their home. The one they claimed as the family's heart. The one they said I abandoned. But according to the file Silas handed me before I left, it wasn't theirs at all. It was mine. The title deed said so. My name listed as joint owner, used to secure the original loan years ago. The mortgage payments that had kept it afloat had come from my account. Every check, every transaction. They called it their legacy, their pride, their family home. But it was built on my silent consent. I pulled over, the engine humming beneath me. My fingers gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles ached. Through the windshield, the warm glow of the living room blurred in the misty glass. I thought about the nights I'd gone without, telling myself family mattered more than comfort. I thought about how they thanked God for their blessings while signing my name beneath their debts. They're all living in the home I saved. I whispered, voice barely audible. The home that was never mine, except when it was time to pay. A car pulled up behind me, honking once. I started the engine again and drove off, the image of their house fading in the rearview mirror. This wasn't about money anymore. It wasn't even about betrayal. It was about reclaiming the life they had stolen inch by inch, until all that was left was a shadow of my own making. I had always been quiet. That was my weapon and my curse. Now, silence would no longer be their protection. By the time I returned to the motel, The last of the afternoon light had disappeared behind the mountain line. The room was dim, lit only by the yellow glow of the desk lamp. I didn't take off my coat. I didn't sit on the bed. I walked straight to the desk, pulled out my laptop, and opened my inbox. The subject line had already written itself in my head. Termination of financial association, effective immediately. I didn't draft it twice. I knew what needed to be said. I typed slowly, deliberately, pausing only to attach the documents I had gathered. Loan paperwork with my forged signature. The co-ownership bakery agreement I never signed. The deed to the house everyone pretended was theirs. My name was on every page, but I had never been in the room. I wrote, "To whom it may concern, as of November 25th, I am formally severing all financial, legal, and personal associations with any debts, accounts, or properties connected to the Mathers family. Please redirect all future correspondence regarding the property at 433 Briarwood Lane to Vera Mathers, the listed party and executor of all financial decisions." I hesitated, not because I was unsure, but because this moment was more final than anything I'd ever written. "I appreciate your attention and discretion in this matter. Sincerely, Maribel Kane." I hit send. A single click. A silent reckoning. The email was gone, but its weight stayed in the air around me. I sat there for a full minute, watching the cursor blink, the screen dim slightly, waiting for something to crash or explode. But nothing happened. Only quiet. The kind that isn't peaceful, just full of anticipation. The next morning, the sky was still gray when I pulled into the driveway. The house looked exactly as I remembered. Same shutters, same chipped paint on the porch steps, same wind chimes rattling against the siding like bones. I stepped out of the car holding the folder. It wasn't heavy, but it felt like it held the full weight of everything I had swallowed for a decade. I didn't ring the bell. I didn't want conversation. I didn't want explanation. I wanted clarity. I placed the folder down gently on the top step. Inside was everything: copies of receipts, bank transfers, property documents, even an itemized spreadsheet detailing every payment I had made for them over the last 9 years. No cover letter. No commentary. Let the truth speak for itself. I stood there for a moment, staring at the door. I knew they were home. The lights were on. The living room curtain twitched slightly, like someone had peeked and stepped back. Let them watch. Let them wonder. Let them scramble. They would call. They would curse. They would cry. But I would not be there for it. For the first time, I would not soften the blow. I would not give them space to rewrite the narrative. They weren't confused. They weren't struggling. They were complicit. They knew what they were doing when they forged my name. They knew what they were doing when they lied about the bakery, about the house, about who paid what. They just never expected the quiet one to have proof. I turned and walked back to the car. I didn't look over my shoulder. I didn't need to. I'd been the one looking back for years. Today, I left it all behind. The folder sat on the porch like a sealed confession. One they didn't get to edit. Back at the motel, my phone didn't stop buzzing. First it was Aloan, for missed calls. Then Mom. 7 voicemails in a row. A cousin. An uncle I hadn't spoken to in 6 years. Blocked numbers. Unknown numbers. All flooding in like the town had caught fire, and they needed me to bring the hose. I let them come. I let the notifications pile. And when they slowed, I opened one. Mom's voice trembled in the first voicemail. "Maribel, what is this? What are you doing? You're overreacting. This could ruin everything." The second message came less than 2 minutes later, angrier. "You don't get to humiliate us like this. This isn't how family behaves. And then a third. Quiet. Desperate. I don't know what you think you found, but you're making a mistake. We can fix this. Just call me back. They weren't sorry. They were scared. Scared the structure they'd built on top of me might finally collapse. Scared of being seen for what they really were. And for the first time, I wasn't afraid of the truth anymore. It wasn't that I didn't care. It was that I finally understood the difference between obligation and ownership. I was tired of being the rescue rope. Tired of being the only adult in a family that expected me to pay and smile and stay quiet about it. My silence had always been their armor. Now it was mine. I hovered over the Do Not Disturb setting and tapped it. My phone went quiet in an instant, the notifications disappearing like noise behind a closed door. It was done. The morning after I silenced my phone, the world felt heavier. Not louder, not brighter, just heavier. I made coffee in the motel's chipped mug, watched the steam rise, and told myself it was just another Thursday. But my chest knew better. I was holding the kind of calm that comes before a storm, the quiet that hums right before something gives way. By the afternoon, I was standing in front of Vera's house again. The air smelled like roasted turkey and maple candles. Cars filled the driveway. Laughter spilled through the open windows. I could hear her voice, clear, controlled, rehearsed. She doesn't belong here anymore, Vera said. She's not part of this family. The words drifted through the cracked door like smoke. They weren't meant for me to hear, but they found me anyway. I froze. My suitcase handle slipped from my grip, thudding softly against the porch step. For a moment, I thought about turning around, getting back in the car and pretending I never came. But then I realized I'd spent my entire life pretending. So I turned the knob and walked inside. The laughter died mid-breath. Every head turned. Forks clinked against plates. The warmth in the room turned to glass, transparent but sharp enough to cut. Vera's face drained of color. Eloan's smile tightened, her voice cracking the silence. Maribel, you're early. I could feel their discomfort thick in the air. I wasn't invited, I said softly, setting my bag down. But since we're talking about family, I thought I should see what that word still means here. No one moved. The only sound was the turkey's slow sizzle from the kitchen. Mom's jaw tightened. You shouldn't have come, she said through her teeth. We're trying to have a nice evening. And I'm trying to have the truth, I replied. A cousin shifted awkwardly. Someone coughed, but I stayed still, my pulse even, my voice steady. It wasn't just the house, I said quietly. It wasn't just the money. It was me, wasn't it? I'm the mistake you all decided to edit out. Her hand gripped the counter. You always have to make everything about you, she hissed. I smiled, but it wasn't kindness, it was clarity. That's funny. Everything was about me. The loans, the house, even the bakery. You just never told me because you needed me quiet. Gasps rippled across the room. Vera tried to speak, but her voice faltered. Don't make a scene, Maribel. Scene? I echoed. This isn't a scene, Mom. This is an audit. I didn't yell. I didn't break anything. I just stood there long enough to watch the image she'd built start to fracture. That was enough. I turned and walked toward the door, feeling her gaze on the back of my neck. My presence alone had done what years of silence never could, shattered her illusion. The next day, I woke before dawn. I hadn't slept much. The motel smelled like burnt coffee and old air freshener, but I didn't care. The decision was already made. I dressed, grabbed the thick envelope sitting on the nightstand, and slid behind the wheel. The sky was still dark when I reached the post office. The air bit my skin as I stood in line, clutching the package like it was alive. Inside were copies of everything. The forged refinance, the fake bakery ownership, the deed. I'd printed a note, short and simple. Please handle accordingly. All relevant parties are aware. No signature. No return address. I stepped up to the counter, handed it over, and watched the clerk weigh it. The sound of the postage machine printing the label felt like a clock striking the hour. A small, irrevocable sound. As the envelope slid into the outgoing bin, I whispered under my breath, "It's done." No one heard, but the universe did. I stepped outside into the chill, the sunrise painting the sky in pale orange. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from something new, something clean. They'd ask questions. They'd demand explanations. They'd spin lies. But this time, I wouldn't be there to correct them. By evening, I found myself back at Vera's house again. Thanksgiving Day. I didn't go inside this time. I waited until the guests were gone, until only her car and Dad's old truck sat in the driveway. Through the window, I could see her moving around the kitchen. The same scene I'd seen 1,000 times. Her wiping counters, arranging leftovers, trying to make order out of chaos. I knocked once. The door opened halfway. "What do you want now?" she asked, her voice tired. "I wanted to say goodbye properly," I said, stepping just inside. "You were right about one thing. I don't belong here anymore." She crossed her arms. "You think you've won? You've done nothing but destroy what was left of this family." I placed my glass of water on the table and looked at her. "What you've done is destroy any chance of us ever being family again." Her lips trembled. "You're going to regret this." "No," I said. "I've spent my whole life regretting staying quiet. This is peace." She turned away, pretending to wipe something that didn't need cleaning. "You're cruel," she whispered. I shook my head. "No, Mom. I'm honest." I walked toward the door. Behind me, the kitchen clock ticked loudly, filling the silence she couldn't bear. When I reached for the handle, I heard her voice one last time. "Maribel, wait." I stopped but didn't turn. "Why couldn't you just let it go?" "Because letting go would have meant erasing myself completely." I didn't answer. I opened the door and stepped into the cool night air. Outside, the wind carried the faint sound of her sobs, muffled and low. It should have hurt, but it didn't. It felt like balance finally being restored. For years, I'd been the invisible thread, holding them together. Now that thread was cut. As I walked back to the car, I felt lighter. Not happy, not triumphant, but whole. For the first time in my life, the silence between us didn't belong to her. It belonged to me. The night was still. The motel hummed with the low, electrical buzz of an old fluorescent light. I sat at the desk again, the same one where I'd sent the emails, the same one where I'd ended decades of silence. My laptop screen glowed, casting blue shadows on the wall. The folder I'd built, everything I'd gathered, was open one last time. I pressed record on my phone. My voice came out steady, low, certain. "For years I've been erased," I said. "My family told me I didn't belong, but I was always here. I've just been used." The camera caught the faint tremor in my breath, the way my eyes refused to drop. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger takes energy, and I'd already given them enough of mine. I kept talking, soft, deliberate, every word carrying the weight of what they had stolen. I told the truth about the forged signatures, about the loans, the bakery, the house. I didn't name them outright. I didn't have to. Everyone in our small town would know exactly who I meant. At the end, I looked straight into the lens. This is a revenge, I said. This is truth. When I hit upload, my hands didn't shake. I watched the progress bar move slowly, silently, until the post went live. Then I sat back, staring at the screen as the first notification appeared. 1 view, 2, 10, 50, hundreds. The video was being shared. Comments poured in shock, sympathy, disbelief. Some called me brave. Some called me cruel. But they were all listening. I whispered to the empty room. I didn't want to be cruel. I wanted to be heard. By midnight, the video had reached thousands. By morning, tens of thousands. My story was no longer mine alone. The next day, chaos erupted. I didn't see it firsthand, but I felt it. The silence that used to smother me had turned on them. Vera's voice echoed through my voicemail, fragmented, frantic. The messages came every hour. How could you do this? Take it down before it ruins everything. You don't understand what you've done. But I did. I understood exactly. At her house, things were unraveling fast. I could picture it. The kitchen phone ringing, the blinds half closed, the whispers from neighbors who suddenly had questions. She had always ruled through image, through perfection. Now the image was broken. A friend from high school messaged me. Your mom's video is everywhere. She looks terrified. Another wrote. She got kicked off the church board. Someone called her a fraud during service. I didn't smile. I didn't celebrate. I just stared at the messages and thought, she built this herself. She'd spent years painting cracks over lies, pretending it was marble. Now every coat of polish was peeling away, revealing what she'd buried under guilt and manipulation. I watched from my motel room, news feeds filling with speculation. The comments shifted from disbelief to outrage. People weren't just angry, they felt betrayed. I didn't do this to destroy her. She did this to herself. For once, I wasn't the one explaining, defending, or begging to be believed. I was just free. That evening, I opened my laptop again. Not for war this time, for peace. The screen blinked to life, and I stared at the blank form in front of me. It was the application for a charitable foundation. Name of the fund. Purpose. Mission statement. I typed, the Eleanor Grant Scholarship. Named after my grandmother, the only person who had seen me, who had written me letters reminding me that being different wasn't a flaw. Purpose. For women rebuilding after family estrangement, financial abuse, or neglect. For those who were told to stay quiet. The cursor blinked at the end of the sentence. I kept typing. This fund is for every woman who has ever been erased. For every person who has been told they don't belong. I uploaded a photo of Grandma, smiling on her porch, sunlight in her eyes. Then I added a final line. Sometimes, the strongest act of love is to start over without them. When I hit publish, the page went live instantly. I shared it once, just once, on my social page. Within minutes, people began donating. Former classmates, strangers, women who wrote, I know exactly what this feels like. I closed my eyes and let the sound of the air conditioner fill the room. For the first time in years, I felt peace. Not the fake kind I'd been forced to perform, but the quiet, earned kind. This wasn't charity. This was reclamation. My legacy wasn't built on silence anymore. Outside the window, the city lights shimmered in the distance. I thought of Grandma, of her letter, of all the times I had swallowed pain and called it loyalty. I whispered, this is for you. And as the night deepened, the notifications kept coming. Donations, messages, gratitude. The world that had once been small enough for them to own had finally grown too big for their lives to fill. I stood by the window, arms folded, watching the reflection of myself in the glass. This was not victory. This was survival made visible. And for the first time in my life, I didn't have to explain it to anyone. The first snow had come early that year. It felt quiet and soft, the kind that muffles sound and memory all at once. I drove without purpose, the roads half empty, until instinct brought me back to the old neighborhood. The streetlights glowed like faded stars, flickering through the white curtain that kept thickening over the town. I parked across from the house and turned off the engine. The silence was immediate. Only the faint tick of the cooling motor and the distant hum of wind filled the air. There it was, our house. My family's house. My house. The roofline sagged a little more than I remembered, and the shutters had lost their color. A layer of snow hugged the porch rail. No laughter this time. No light. No movement inside. They were still there. I knew they were. But it didn't matter. I sat there a while, watching the snowfall blur the outlines of the windows. Somewhere deep inside, I could still hear echoes of old holidays, music, clinking silverware, voices overlapping like waves. I could still see the reflection of that life through the glass, but I wasn't part of it anymore. I wasn't angry. I wasn't grieving. Just still. I stepped out of the car. The cold bit into my cheeks, made my breath visible in short, slow bursts. I crossed my arms against the wind and stood across the street, staring at the front door. That house wasn't just wood and drywall. It was a monument to every lie we'd built as a family. Every secret covered with polite smiles. Every false "we're fine." I whispered to the quiet air. I never wanted this house. I wanted the love it promised. Snowflakes clung to my hair, melted against my skin. I let the wind sting my face until it felt clean again. Then, slowly, I turned back toward the car. The past still stood behind me, frozen and silent, but it no longer owned my steps. I started walking away. The motel room was colder than usual that night. I turned the heater up, but the air still felt hollow. My phone sat face down on the table. When I finally picked it up, the screen flashed. 63 missed calls. Vera, Eloan, even Dad. Unknown numbers mixed between them. I didn't open them right away. I stared at the screen, at my own reflection in the black glass, before swiping to voicemail. The last one had come in that afternoon. Her voice played through the speaker, thin and tired, cracking between words. I don't know what happened to us, Maribel. You're all I've got left. Please come home. Please. I closed my eyes and listened, not because I needed to, but because it felt like finishing a book I'd already memorized. The words were familiar, every plea practiced. There was a time when that tone, half desperation, half command, would have broken me. Now it was just background noise. I let the voicemail end. No tears, no anger, just the sound of the heater humming in the corner. I don't need to hear her voice anymore. I whispered. I've heard it all. My thumb hovered over the delete button for a moment. Then I pressed it. Gone. The silence that followed wasn't empty, it was clean. A week later, I stood on the balcony of my new apartment. The air smelled of city rain and distant coffee shops. Below me, the street buzzed faintly with life, people talking, car doors shutting, a dog barking somewhere in the distance. I had signed the lease 2 days after the scholarship fund launched. The donations had surpassed anything I imagined. Hundreds of people, most of them strangers, had given not just money, but messages, stories of being cut out, forgotten, rewritten. For the first time in years, my name wasn't attached to debt. It was attached to hope. The apartment was small, barely furnished, but it was mine. Every inch of it felt earned. On the balcony table sat a small wooden box. Inside was the key to the old house, the last tie between me and the life that had once claimed me. I picked it up, running my thumb along its smooth edge. I remember Dad handing it to me when I was 16. "You'll always have a place here," he'd said. A promise that turned into a debt. I turned the key in my palm, then placed it back inside the box. I didn't lock it. I didn't close the lid. "I'm not a daughter to them anymore," I murmured, voice steady. "But I don't need to be." The air was crisp, the night sky wide. Snow hadn't reached this part of the state yet, but the cold still brushed against my face, like a memory. I left the key where it was, and stepped back from the table. I wasn't walking away from them anymore. I was walking towards something else, something quieter, steadier. Freedom didn't roar. It exhaled. I leaned on the balcony railing, watching the glow of passing headlights stretch across the pavement below. Maybe forgiveness wasn't something you gave. Maybe it was what was left when you stopped needing answers. I smiled. Not big, not triumphant. Just enough. Because sometimes, peace doesn't announce itself. It just shows up and waits for you to notice. Sometimes, peace doesn't come with a parade. It arrives quietly. After you've burned the last bridge they used to cross your boundaries. If you've ever been made to feel like your existence was a burden, maybe this story reminded you you're not alone. Have you ever had to choose peace over family? Drop your story in the comments. I read every one. And if this resonated with you, don't forget to subscribe. There's more to come.